And welcome back. My next guest is Dennis Leston, the Director of the Department of Environmental Control for the town of Clarkstown. Welcome, Dennis.
Thank you.
So, Dennis, happy to have you here, and I know we've got a lot to kind of talk about, a number of projects that your department is handling, some fairly large projects, that we'll discuss in some depth. But before we get to that, maybe you could talk a little bit for the benefit of our viewers about your background, how long you've been with the town, and what brought you into town government.
Well, I started in town here 23 years ago in '95, and it's been in and out. I started in the late '70s and did a stint with recreation and parks out in the town of Huntington, then went back into private industry, finished up my degree, and then did some structural work, a couple of different firms in the course of time, structural, marine, and a number of different things. But land use, land development, and municipal engineering, site work has always been, where I started. I started working for a land surveyor when I was actually in high school.
Wow.
So.
And how long have you lived in Rockland County?
Just about 40 years.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, 30.
So about
31 years, 32 years.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So, Dennis, your department, Department of Environmental Control. Why don't you just speak a little bit about your department? How, what are some of the major tasks that you're involved with right now?
Well, our department, as you know, is the town engineering office. We handle all of or most of the town projects with regards to drainage improvements, sewer improvements, upgrades, maintenance, overall construction, as well as providing technical advice to the town board, the planning board, and the zoning board, and then also providing periodic inspection to site and subdivision projects to ensure that they're complying with all of their municipal approvals.
Mm-hmm. And you have about how many staff in your department right now?
Right now we're a little bit light with some of the retirements. So we've got 3 people in the design side, 2 inspectors, and then we've got our sewer crew is 5 people outside, and our other crew at the solid waste maintaining the closed landfill and the grass down there is a full-time crew of 2.
Mm-hmm. So, and I think that's important to kind of note, because your department not only handles kind of the planning process with all the land use boards, and as businesses look to expand or do work in that area, but you have the sewers. Right now we have the Rockland County Sewer District number 1, mm-hmm. which covers Orangetown, covers Ramapo, Clarkstown, and a small piece of Orangetown, and then we've got our own sewer system that is adjunct to Sewer District number 1. We don't have our own sewer treatment facilities at Sewer District number 1, but we've got pump stations. About how many pump stations do we have?
We have 19 sewer pump stations that we've been upgrading and improving over the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. The current round will be 3 pump stations, and then our last round, for which we've just received an EFC Clean Water grant for approximately $730,000 against the $2.9 million total cost. Will complete the last 4 pump mm-hmm. stations in our system.
Right, and so certainly there's some real efforts that are taking place over there, and then in addition to that, your department's also responsible for administering the contract with the garbage haulers, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And that's a fairly garbage haulers and the recycling.
And the recycling contract as well.
Right, and if folks want to be able to get recycling bins or leaf bags, that come to your office.
Room 102 in Town Hall.
That's it. You come right into the basement, go right in.
That's it. Just second door past the building department.
Sign your name and get your materials. So, Dennis, there's a bunch of projects that you're working on right now within the town. Why don't we first talk about Cranford Drive? This is a project that actually dates back to Supervisor Holbrook's tenure, not even my predecessor, but the predecessor before.
Yes.
That really kind of covers some significant flooding areas in New City. Maybe you could speak a little bit about the project.
Yeah, the original impetus for the Cranford Drive Drainage Improvement Project was actually an error in the original FEMA flood study. And the floodplain elevation in a portion of that area was understated by 5 feet. So even though we were issuing building permits and COs on the requirements above the floodplain, it turns out that there were a number of homes that actually were below the flood elevation because of that FEMA error. So what we've put together over the course of time has been a major project to completely contain that 100-year flood within a newly configured channel. And then that went on hiatus for a period of time. There was a reduced scale project that was contemplated for some time that would not have provided the benefit that people needed up there. And then with the New York Rising program and the availability of some CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant disaster relief money through the New York Rising program, we went back to the original scope of the project, but we amended it to include a number of aquatic and environmental enhancements, extensive plantings, aquatic improvements within the stream channel itself, and will still provide the overall flood reduction benefit and bring a lot of these homes out of the floodplain. But it'll provide a greatly enhanced aquatic environment within the stream channel and an upland environment adjacent to the stream channel as well.
And so that's in New City.
Yes.
Cranford Drive actually connects into Old Route 304, correct?
It crosses under Old Route 304 and then loops around and meets up with the west branch of the Hackensack River before it goes into Lake DeForest.
And presumably when this is done, a lot of the homes that are in there's a number of folks that during Hurricane Sandy and some of these other, Floyd in particular,
Yes.
People had as much as 10 feet of water that came into their property. So a number of these properties will actually be moved out of the floodplain as well?
Yes, some of the piece of the property, because of where the stream is located and where the easements are, the property itself will remain in the floodplain, or a portion of the property will, but we believe that all of the homes and structures will qualify for what they call letter of map amendment, which will remove the structure from the floodplain and then either reduce the flood insurance premium if people choose to maintain flood insurance, or eliminate the necessity to carry it.
Right. So let's move on from the Cranford Drive project, because that's roughly a $4.4 million project, $4 million of which is being funded by the state and the county, and so really the town's portion is going to be a few $100,000. The expected completion of that should be by the end of next year?
Approximately a year, yeah.
Okay,
So,
approximately a year. And the West Nyack revitalization has been talked about for very, very many years. There's been some committees that have been put together, and maybe you could kind of give an update for our residents as to where we stand on the West Nyack revitalization, particularly Phase 1.
right, yes, as you know, West Nyack will be done in 2 phases. Phase 1 will replace the 2 culverts under West Nyack Road near the Village Square Shopping Center, and one a little bit further down near the condominiums, and then reconfigure that piece of roadway in between there, as well as doing some of the work off of the roadways to enhance the wetland areas and provide for some stormwater detention on both the north side and the south side of West Nyack Road. So that one has been moving along. We have a designer who is working on finalizing the plans for that project. We had a number of meetings with some of the resident groups and interested parties down there to finalize some of the selections for ancillary materials, so that instead of doing Phase 1 partially and then waiting until Phase 2 to complete the curbs and the sidewalks and pavers, Phase 1 will be done completely 100%. To avoid having to, rip up the area twice in subsequent phases. And then Phase 2 would follow with a hiatus in between Phase 1 and Phase 2, because West Nyack has secured the Fireman's Parade for 2020.
And so Phase 1, the anticipated time going out to bid is?
We anticipate putting the job out to bid in January, late January in 2019. bring it back most likely in February, get a contract awarded so that as soon as the weather breaks in 2019, Phase 1 can start.
Great. And as we look at the Phase 1, there is $1 million grant that we've been able to secure from the town, from the state rather, for the town as it relates to the construction of those detention and retention
Yes,
ponds.
the EFC, there's an EFC grant for just over $1 million that is earmarked to the environmental improvements and the wetland enhancements in the area south. It will be walking trails and enhanced wetland areas, educational signage, and
Right.
a number of other amenities in there, as well as a small parking area to facilitate access to the park and to the wetland area.
Right. And so that does include a bit of an expansion of the existing park that's across from the post office down there as well?
Yes, it does.
Reconfiguring of that, there'll be a small parking area, then there'll be a pathway around the detention pond that'll be on that side of the street
Yes,
as well?
as well as an expanded playground area. The gazebo will actually be relocated and replaced with something a little bit more in keeping with the West Nyack Hamlet area, and then some enhanced landscaping, and the memorial area will be redone as well.
Right. And we're also looking at, as we're kind of, moving forward, you had mentioned the sewer pump station projects. We've actually got about $1.4 million roughly in grant funding between 2 rounds of funding from Albany, to kind of cover the cost of that. It's about $5.5 million, I think, altogether.
The total, yeah, we're at this phase that we're in now on the 3 stations is $1.9 million, and we have a grant for $600,000 and change from EFC on that. And then the next round, the estimated cost now is at $2.9 million to complete the last 4 stations. And that was the press release just came out yesterday, actually, that we had received $733,000 as a part of that project.
Right, which is great news for the town, because these are necessary things to be done. Many of these pump stations are well past their useful life, and God forbid, but a pump station goes down, there's sewer backups. It's a real significant issue for residents.
It's a terrible issue, and again, some of these stations, we're maintaining them on a constant basis, and always checking them. But some of them, we're at the point where some of the equipment that's been in there, you can't even get replacement parts for it anymore. So we've been upgrading all of the stations over time, and we're getting close to the end.
Right. Absolutely. So Dennis, I know there's a bunch of other projects. We'll have Phase 2 to kind of speak about. We've got some, the Klein Avenue Levee, which maybe you could give a very quick update on that.
Yeah, the Klein Avenue Levee, again, this is another project that's been, on the books for quite some time. The levee is going to be extended and raised so that it will meet the new FEMA requirements for a flood protection levee. And again, this is geared towards trying to get all of the properties in that area, out of the floodplain and reclassified as protected. So right now we're in the process of working with the state, because again, this is a project that we're doing with FEMA hazard mitigation grant money as a result of Irene, Sandy, and Lee. And right now we're just waiting on the Hazard Mitigation Division to issue what's called a conditional letter of map revision. And as soon as that is issued, then FEMA's Hazard Mitigation branch will commit the balance of the $3.48 million that we need to do the construction of the project.
Right.
Past that, we're pretty much ready to go out to bid at almost any time. As soon as that conditional letter comes in, we're going to drop the hammer and
move
get
forward.
that going and move forward. People have been waiting quite some time down there.
Now, just one last thing, Dennis. I know as we were kind of preparing for the interview, you wanted to give a reminder to our residents about storm drains and sewer drains.
Yes, please. The couple of things that are extremely important, both for the drainage system as well as general safety on the roadways. A couple of things. The town is what's known as a municipal separate storm sewer system entity, and there are a number of state mandated requirements, one of which is maintenance of the drainage systems and preventing what's known as illicit discharges. So basically anything other than stormwater or footing drains or roof drains should never be drained into a catch basin. You know, keep in mind, most of our water comes from Lake DeForest, our drinking water, and it's processed. And most of our stormwater goes into Lake DeForest in some way, shape, or form. About 80% of the town drains through the Hackensack River, and most of that goes through Lake DeForest. So the storm drainage is an important issue, as well as the additional issue this time of the year of where do you put your leaves. You know, and don't put the leaves in the street, because it not only creates a hazard for driving, but then that material also gets washed into the storm drains, and it creates an additional layer of what's called nutrient enhancements in some of the waterways, which leads to a lot of the algae blooms, and some of the fish kill that you see, you know, can all be caused by what's urban runoff, you know, people fertilizing excessively, or some of the other nutrients that just get carried into the system, and it has quite a bit of detrimental effect on water quality. So keep in mind, whatever, you know, you flush off your driveway ends up in our drinking water supply.
Right. So it's important that there are lots of folks that want to really be proactive with the environment, but you're not really being proactive with the environment if you're dumping old chemicals into storm drains and things of that nature.
No, not at all.
Bring them up to the collection place that the Solid Waste Authority runs. You know, up at the Fire Training Center in Pomona.
Yes.
Keep them out of the storm drains and try and keep the storm drains clear.
Yes, and you know, one of the biggest things people don't even realize is pet waste. You know, pet waste is one of the biggest sources of, you know, pollutants and water quality detriments in the country.
Really?
So, you know, pick up after your pet.
Pick up after your pet. Curb your dog and make sure you pick it up. Well, Dennis, thanks so much. My guest has been Dennis Leston, the director of our town's Department of Environmental Control, and we thank you for your 23 years of dedicated service here within the town of Clarkstown, and on all the projects that you've worked on in the past, the ones that you're working on in the future to kind of move these things forward. There's going to be thousands of residents that are going to be benefited by a number of these projects that are coming through the Klein Avenue Levee, Cranford Drive, and the West Nyack Revitalization Phase 1 and 2. And there's going to be some real practical results of that's going to help people to not have to worry when the skies open up with rain, with flooding. They're going to be able to come out of the floodplains. They're going to pay reduced prices for insurance for their home, and not have to cover flood insurance based on all those efforts from the town. But more importantly, we're making our environment our safe place, and our town a safe place. So, Dennis, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for being such a great guest tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up will be Ray Botto, World War II veteran. Please stay tuned.